So you were in the generation where your contemporaries weren't necessarily the first to do these things.
No.
But you were just behind the ones who were.
We stood on their shoulders.
You stood on their shoulders, and you could see the path that they had to follow.
Right, because we were around in the 50s and 60s when they were struggling and denied things. And for them to finally get it, nothing was going to get in our way and to pursue it. So I think that's probably watching Mrs. Shriver, Sister Henrietta, and the others say, you can do it. You know, you can. Yes, you can. Just keep on pushing. You know, in a respectful way, always be feminine, you know, don't try to be like the men, you know, things like that. And what even in sports, you know, you're a woman, be a woman in sports. You don't have to try to compete with the men athletes or any of that. But that's we had to keep it going, keep the momentum going. Yes, I was of that group. And now women, I think, in the law, they have the options. But some of them aren't always choosing. They're making choices. And isn't that the best of all worlds? To be able to have the option to do the boardroom track or the partner track or not to.
Right.
They have the option.
In the old days, you were either denied an option or you were a pioneer where there was one option and then you were the first one who got to do it.
And you had to raise your kids and be the 24/7 in the firm or whatever you were doing, no matter what, and try to work around it.
Well, why don't we break now?
Okay.
So this is the second tape, and we're interviewing Anne Burke today. And I'd like to discuss your career on the courts. Let's begin with the Court of Claims, which for the record is a court that deals with claims against the state of Illinois.
Yes.
When people believe that the state owes them money.
That's correct. When the people believe, then when the state owes the money for some reason, whether it be a contract, a personal injury, because the state road was damaged in some way, because states have sovereign immunity, and most states do. So therefore, this particular court is a legislative court, meaning that the legislature decided that it would be really unfair not to have an opportunity for someone who was aggrieved by a state agency or a state building or road or whatever contract to come into the Court of Claims to find whether or not they could be reimbursed for whatever their injury was. So most states have a Court of Claims court. The federal government has a claims court too, where there are only certain kinds of actions that can be addressed. For instance, in a personal injury case, if the state is a defendant in a matter and there's other defendants, then the Court of Claims requires that the other matters be addressed first and a judgment in the other civil actions take place first before they can come into the Court of Claims to get reimbursement from the state, whatever that may be. Or if you have a contract with the state of Illinois and there's an appropriation for you to do your work under that contract and it hasn't been fulfilled within the year and that appropriation lapses, you're out.
I happen to remember that any number of times.
Yes.
You're working, as I did sometimes, as a special assistant attorney general or so forth, and you're working and everyone from the state agrees they owe you money, but gosh, they didn't get around to paying you by the time the fiscal year is over and you go to the Court of Claims.
Yes, yes.
Now, this all sounds rather bloodless compared to the real life people who you dealt with in the office. Was that a transition?
Yeah, it was. It was a transition, but it was only part-time. And I learned an awful lot from my colleagues who were the other judges on the Court of Claims. We sat as an appellate court. We sat en banc, the five of us. And the trials and the testimony and the evidence was taken by commissioners, of which there were 20-some commissioners. So what we got was like an appellate court. The record and the briefs And that's where we had oral arguments at the final stage.
All 5 of you?
Yes, we sat in
together?
bunk, yes, yes. But one of us would be the author. We would take turns.
And so, remind me, how many years did you do this as a part-time
7.
commitment?
7 years, yes.
And the next step is the Illinois Appellate Court.
Yes.
And
that appointment or nomination by Justice McMurrow and appointment by the Supreme Court came actually it came after 2 years I spent working for Governor Edgar. I left the Court of Claims to work for him as a special counsel on child welfare, looking at child welfare issues in the state of Illinois, but concentrating basically on the Cook County judicial juvenile justice system and working with the police and social service agencies in the Cook County area. Even though it was statewide, I did statewide work. So I did that for 2 years, and it was after that that Justice McMurrow nominated me for the appellate court.
So what was it like, you as a Democrat, married to a very important Democrat, working for a Republican governor? Were there any conflicts, any difficulties with that?
At home or working? Oh,
well, I guess
yes,
both.
yes. Well, it was kind of interesting because I was at my husband and I were at a party in, I forget what year, 92, and things were really bad in the Department of Children and Family Services and in Cook County especially. The Joseph Wallace case, in which Joseph Wallace was a baby who was returned to his mentally ill mother, who she ultimately hung. And there were other cases that were just in the news, and it was horrendous. And we were at this cocktail party, and I was saying to people there, I just wish I could do something. You know, it seems like the agencies are not working together, the police department, the child protection state people, and the city. There were 3 different agencies, state, county, and city, need to work together. And it was a Republican administration, and everything in Cook County was Democratic, and it didn't seem like they were talking. I said, I wish I could do something. I would love to do something. Well, that got me into trouble. I must have had 2 glasses of wine. And the next day, I got a call from Jim Riley. Jim Riley was at that time, Governor Edgar's chief of staff. And he said, Anne, I heard that you were interested in trying to help in this area. And I said, yes. I said, I don't know what I could do. So we had coffee. And then I told my husband, I said, you know, they really think that I might be able to be helpful. And I really like to pursue that. And he said, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Go ahead. So I started my due diligence. I called Father Smith. He had run a school for kids, and I called so many other people in the social service area. I interviewed some people that were working for the Department of Children and Family Services at the time. I talked to the police superintendent, so I could figure out in my mind what is it that I could do so I could give them a plan that, here, this is what I think I might be able to coordinate for you. And so I did that. I met again after I'd talked to everybody, and I talked to Jim Riley again, and I decided that I should be special counsel and investigate a number of different things, talk to the police department and have them work with the investigators for the Department of Children and Family Services. I could do things in juvenile court. I talked to, at that time, Phelan, who was president of the county board. Money was going in from all these sources to the same geographic area constituents who were the people, 2/3 of the social welfare agency's problems in the state, in the Cook County area. And they loved the idea. And I could have staff and everything. So I went home and I told my husband that I was going to do that. I was going to leave the Court of Claims and break down my law office, and I was going to go to work for Governor Edgar. And I told him that I told the governor that. He says, what? You did what? You're going to work for a Republican governor? I said, Ed, I asked you about this, and you thought it was a good idea. He didn't have any recall of that. And so he was really upset. And I said, well, I'm going to do this. This is just the way it is. But he said, you can't. I'm a Democratic committeeman. You cannot do that. I said, well, why not? Aren't we all supposed to work together? And besides, I'm not the Democratic committeeman, you are, you know. And if I feel like voting for a Republican, I will, you know. I mean, so we got to that. And so it was kind of like a standoff in our house for a while, for a couple weeks. And in the meantime, Ed had called almost every one of our close friends and asked them to call me to suggest to me that it might not be a good idea. So all of our close friends, they didn't want to get in the middle. They would call and say, Anne, Ed asked me to call. Would you tell him I called? That's the extent of it. They never asked me not to do it. So at the end of the day, there was a press conference. Edgar appointed me, and that was it. And then today, if you were to ask Ed, he would probably say it was one of the best moves that I ever made. And it was a wonderful experience. I mean, all kinds of opportunities. And through that, Ed and I became licensed foster parents for the state of Illinois.
Oh, that's where that began.
And it wasn't because I thought we should become licensed foster parents, because our youngest child at that time was 20 years old and out of the house, and we were free at last, you know. And I started coming home from hearing terrible stories about kids. And the last one that broke the camel's back, basically, was about a little baby girl that was only 2 weeks old who had open heart surgery. And the Department of Children and Family Services needed short-term emergency caregivers to come and take care of this baby because she needed another one. And maybe if there was, you know, a godfather out there, a fairy godmother, that they could pay for the next surgery. And so we were out with some friends, and people you know, actually, Sandy and Jack Uthman. And I was telling them the story, and Ed says, well, we should become licensed foster parents. And I said, what? Us? We haven't had a baby in the house in 20 years. He said, well, no, we should do this. We could do that. We could hire a nurse and take care of this baby, and we'll pay for the surgery. I just slept on that one, you know. But actually, the next day, I started thinking about it positively and thinking, well, he wants to do it for all the right reasons, taking care of a child. And I think I might want to do it because I want to go through the foster parenting license process to see how bad it really is, because I had heard horrible stories about it. So that's how we decided to become licensed foster parents. By the time we got finished with becoming it took 9 months. 9 months. So anyone, you could see why people would be discouraged. And not only that, but the department had to call me to make appointments with me. They had to call the governor's office to get me. And it still took 9 months. It was terrible. But by the time we got done going through the classes and the background checks and everything, I was on the appellate court because I had done my 2 years with Edgar. And we started getting calls. We got a call in January of 1996 to take a baby who was at St. Mary Nazareth Hospital, fetal alcohol cocaine baby, 5 days old. Could we take him for a couple weeks? So I went to the hospital, picked him up and brought him home. Our housekeeper took care of him, and I took care of him, and all my kids took care of him. And that was our first child. But it was grueling punishment to let him go. We just decided that we were going to keep this baby forever in our mind, you know. Just a beautiful child, and it was tragic. But that wasn't to be, and Ed said, no, we're never doing this again. We just cannot be taking these children, loving them so much and giving them up. Because we can take care of a child, but they should give us a child, you know. And so he said, absolutely not.